And what was your path? Well, I guess let's first start out talking about your parents. So I assume initially you kind of had to come out a few times. Like, give me the journey there as far as your parents were concerned.
Yeah, I grew up in a time before the internet, you know what I mean, as a youngin, and no, cell phones or, computers, and there wasn't a lot of diversity on television. And so I knew that I felt like a girl, but I didn't really realize, I didn't even realize that you could do anything about it. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I should have been born this way. My cousins, Tyler and Tanya, are twins and a boy and a girl. And I used to always think, like, why am I not like Tanya? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, I'm like Tanya, but I'm not like Tanya.
Wow, so twins run in your family.
I guess so.
Well,
They must.
they say that twins run in its generations. Like usually, like it skips a generation. But yes, usually when there's like one set of twins in a family, there's other twins abound.
Right. Well, in my story, there's a magical rock story. Yeah, I thought I was a girl, but I was like, okay, well, I guess I don't know. I guess I'm just going to live my life this way. But I know that I'm attracted to men, so I must be gay. So when I was probably 18, I came out to my parents as gay. Um, and then I tried to live that life. But along that time, I found drag, and it was a perfect way for me to show my inner side, and show who I was as a person, to the world. And so I got really into doing drag, and it wasn't, it was a few years into doing drag, living in New York City, I realized by meeting people that, oh, this is possible. I can, follow my soul,
And how old were you when you first had the voice in your head that you were actually female?
I remember saying that about Tanya when I was 7.
When you were 7. And how did your parents initially react to you coming out as gay?
They they were worried, of course, but they were supportive of me. It was in the late 80s. you know
So you were it was around the AIDS epidemic.
it was right in full bore AIDS epidemic, and they were terrified. And I realized that, and I assured them that I wasn't going to do anything unsafe, and that, I was going to, be okay. But they saw what I went through in grade school. In high school, and how rough it was for me, and to live this life and to go out into the world. They were worried, but what they did teach me along the way is to think about every situation I'm in, to stand up for myself, be strong, and know who I was. And so I knew that they had taught me the tools to be able to make it in the world, and so I wasn't scared. And then when I came out a second time, I was 24, 25, and I realized that this is what I wanted to do. And I started my transition. I started taking hormones, and I wrote them both a letter. And I just talked to them and told them, this is how I feel. You might not understand it, because even in the early 90s, it was not on the topic of anybody's lips. Trans was not, well known, and they got the letter, and they mulled it over for a couple of weeks, and then they bought tickets and flew to New York City to make sure I was okay. And when they arrived in New York City, they saw my life. It was in the middle of my 90s power in New York City. I had millions of friends. I would walk down the street and everyone would know my name. And I was, they could see that I was a part of this huge but nurturing community. And so they were relieved. And I remember my dad looking at me saying, like, this makes so much more sense, Candis.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Totally progressive parents.
Totally progressive parents. Like marching in the 60s in San Francisco for civil rights parents, you know.
What was your goal? You know, when I think about this, oftentimes when I ask people this question, I've never said this, but for some reason I'm going to say it to you. I think of, you know, that story that Madonna has kind of created for herself, that like she came to New York straight from Detroit with $20 in her pocket and just knew that she was going to rule the world, which obviously there's a bit of bullshit sprinkled in there, but it's a great story. What was your goal when you set out to move to New York? Like, was it to become a dancer, a performer, an actress?
It was to become a dancer, performer, actress, star. I didn't know what. I knew I was going to try until something happened. And so I knew I had the confidence to do it, but I just needed to prove to everyone else that had misgivings about me being trans, or, you know, femme, you know, that I could do the job and that I was right for the part. And for me, I got turned down a lot because before I transitioned, I was a girl that looked like a boy going to these auditions, you know what I mean? And everyone could see right through that. And I mean, even in the 90s, that was not a good look. You know, it's not till this past few years where you're allowed to just be openly anything you want and it's embraced. You know, back then it was not embraced.
How did your act evolve pre and post transition? Like, you started out as a drag queen, essentially. So where were you performing drag? Like which bars, which clubs?
So Barracuda, I had my longest run there. I was working at the Tunnel, the Palladium, Webster Hall, Limelight sometimes, USA, which was like one of my favorite clubs in 90s history, with the slide that went down. I don't know if you ever went to Club USA.
I've heard stories about the slide. Yeah.
So much fun. And, you know, Cafe Con Leche, I didn't really work there, but I used to go out there and stuff. You know, in the 90s, there was a lot of the places that I worked at were like small bars, you know what I mean? Like out of the way, places like, you know, Crowbar and stuff like that, where you could get your night. And in New York, it's different. You would be given a night, and you would host the night, you would perform, it would be your show. There wasn't a cavalcade of girls. It's like you had to learn how to host a night, be on stage for an hour and figure it out. And so I started my transition when I was working at Barracuda, and I was working at Patricia Field at the same time during the day.
What did you do for Patricia Field?
I worked in the wig bar.
Amazing.
On 8th Street with all of that madness.
What year were you working for Pat Field?
Oh my God. I'm so
did
bad.
Did this cross over with Sex and the City?
Yes, it did. So I was working at it before Sex and the City, and then I moved to Hotel Venus, and I was working there. And then Sex and the City was happening when I crossed over from 8th Street to Hotel Venus, and in the middle of transitioning. And I knew that I could go and I could get my work, and I would, you know, for me, working at Pat's was not my end all. You know, there were workers there that, like Maria, who's like, this was her like gig, and she managed, and it was amazing. But I was like, I went there to see my best friend Dana and hang out with her, and she was in the salon doing hair, and I was at the wig bar, and we would kiki all day long and smoke a pack of cigarettes, and like, you know, just it was super fun. But you know, that's what you do in your 20s, you know. And then I decided I was going to transition, and it was a really kind of tough decision. You would think that it would be easy because, you know, I'm living in New York City. I'm working in drag in drag in nightlife. But I was so scared that all the stuff that I'd built was going to end. I didn't know if my community at the time was going to accept this, and what is going to happen to my career. This is what I love to do. And I was super nervous. But then I just decided, I have to do it. I was sitting in my room one night on 14th and 9th in my little 600 square foot, or no, I'm sorry, 300 square foot apartment for $600 a month before the glorious meatpacking district. It was really a meatpacking district filled with sorts of things. Jays hang out and, why am I spacing on the club there? Jackie 60. And I was sitting there one night and I just looked at myself and I was miserable. I mean, I was just like, why am I feeling so miserable? And I was like, I want to grow old as a woman. And this is what I have to do in order to have peace. So I went to my girlfriend who had transitioned at the time. And I was like, all right, I'm ready. And she's like, oh no, sweetheart, you need to do 2 months of electrolysis and you have to, do this and do that. And then I'll give you your first shot. So that's kind of how it went. And then I went on stage at Barracuda and I was like, okay, everybody. I mean, and this was like heyday Barracuda. It was like packed every Monday night. It went from like 3 people in the audience on a Monday or in the club or in the audience to like completely packed to the very end of the club for almost 10 years, and I'm not patting myself on back or anything now.
No, I will back this up. It's true. There were really only 3 people to ever do that Monday night at Barracuda. It was you, Peppermint, and Bob the drag queen.
Right.
So only 3 people have done this. So
right.
I believe you. I'm like, I know.
Mondays, and I was like, all right, Peppermint, there you go, girl. And so I decided I was going to transition on stage in front of Barracuda. And every week I would tell them stories of what happens in New York City while you're transitioning. And I would make light of it and I would tell jokes and I would, be completely over the top and dramatic, but they loved it and no one cared. And so it was, it was, thank God, and then I started doing a Saturday night at the Tomato, and it was a restaurant, and I started going out onto the street and I would do half of my show. The audience would be facing the front of the restaurant. And so at one point I was like, why am I stuck inside on the stage? Why don't I go out and do half my show in New York City? And that became like a huge thing that I used to be well known for. And then when the Tomato closed, I just went to, down 8th Street to one of the restaurants. I would knock on the door and say, I'm Candis Cayne. They're like, I know. And I'd be like, I want to do my Saturday night show here. And they'd be like, okay, fabulous. What do you need? And so like for, 10 years, I went from, restaurant to restaurant down 8th Avenue between 14th and 23rd.
Talk about this performing in the streets that you would do. Basically, you would perform in the middle of New York City traffic, like cabs coming at you. Can you help sort of illustrate that experience?
Totally. Like I would go out on the street, start a song inside. I would open the door, I would go out. So everybody inside would have this loud blaring music, but outside I could still hear it, but not as much. But it was like a big, huge music video. And of course I'm a dancer and I'm totally into it. And the one thing that you can always rely on is crazy stuff happening in New York City. And when anybody does anything, people want to talk about it, talk to you, get involved. And so, I've had things happen to me where, during a light change, I went into the middle of the street and 2 motorcycles pulled up beside me. And I was like, hey, performing. And they were like laughing and they looked at each other and they pressed a button and flames shot out of their motorcycles. And it was like, the audience, like I could see them jumping in the air inside. It was just so amazing. Like during Fleet Week, I was performing one night, and this whole crew of sailors in their gorgeous outfits came and picked me up over their heads, spun me in the street, and then brought me into the on stage. And that would happen. I mean, not every week, stuff like that, but almost every week, some crazy magical stuff. Fire engines would let me get on the back of their truck and I would drive. I decided to test the mic to see how far it would go. So I got in a cab and I drove around the block while I was trying to talk to people. I mean, it was a long block. I can't, and on the mic only worked like for 2 minutes. And I was like, damn, they're waiting there for me. But it was just so much fun. And it gave my show, it gave me something to look forward to every time I performed there.
It had this element of unpredictability and true man on the street improv sensibility you had to really cultivate.
Oh, totally. And I did a flash mob before they were even known. I had I had this group, I would take dance classes. And so I asked them if they would come one night and like come from different parts of the streets of New York and we could do a full-on dance number, and they did, and it was magical. It was so much fun.
Did your show or your act evolve, pre and post transition? I know like you told the story of you basically like walked the audience like through the months and the years of you transitioning at Barracuda, but when you were let me say this better. How was your act most markedly different when you were performing as a drag queen versus performing as the Candis Cayne that we know today?
Well, I think early on in any drag career, you're learning. And so I would say that when I first started at Barracuda and it was drag, I was learning about everything about how I performed, what I talk about. And Barracuda was a great place to learn how to do a one-woman show for an hour and a half, and on the spot improv, And so I think that the biggest difference is I felt more comfortable in my skin. So I feel like I only got better. I could be more natural, be funnier, and talk about, to me, the funniest things are stuff that happens to you every single day. And so it was more of like a comedy hour with numbers, and I would tell these stories. I would open with a story of something that happened that week. I would do a number, and then the rest was just smooth sailing. I would say a few words in between numbers or tell another little story. It was a formula. I learned a formula that worked,
And were you Candis Cayne right out of the gate? Like, did that name stay with you forever?
Yeah, I was in Maui the final year before I moved away, and I did a production of La Cage aux Folles, and I met this queen, Lana Kane, who taught me how to do makeup. I mean, it was bad. Like, I look at those pictures, I'm like, oh my God. And so I kind of got my name from Lana Kane, and now, she changed her name to Guava Chiffon. Well, I'm like, thanks, Guava. But no, and it started as Candy, but that lasted about 2 weeks, and I'm not a Candy, and so I was like, I'm gonna do Candis. And then by the time I started my transition, everyone in New York knew. Well, I mean, I'm being dramatic, but everyone knew me.
Everyone knew you as Candis Cayne.
How am I going to change my name to like Veronica?
Right.
So it just kind of stuck with me.
And does it just blow your mind now that there's a show like Pose is on the air, like a show specifically dedicated to telling these trans stories?
I mean, it's incredible, right? Like, from me auditioning, getting Dirty Sexy, going to other auditions, having to meet with the producers and writers before I went on set, because I'd have to tell them that that's not how trans people would act or work or live, or things that they would say, to a show like Pose, which is, all trans, it's really kind of amazing. And just, the opportunities now are just so much more vast,
Did Laverne Cox must have been coming up around the time that you were in New York City nightlife. Did you know her from New York?
Yes, we all knew each other. We ran in two different circles though. So like we would see each other like, hey girl, like when I would go to Lucky Chang's, whatever.
Yeah.
And um, but we ran in two different circles, but we all knew each other. We were all friendly with each other unless there was real beef. And most of the time there wasn't. It was such like a magical time in New York, the 90s, because there was no cell phones yet. Everything that you did was word of mouth. If you slayed at a club, that everyone would find out eventually, and that's how you promoted a night. You know what I mean? Or flyers, but and we were all really pretty much supportive of each other because we only had each other. We knew who each other was. We got their back. It was just, that's the way it was.
For now, in terms of your movement into mainstream acting, you talked about, like you were the first trans woman to have a leading regular role. You were the love interest to, was that Billy Baldwin? To Billy Baldwin on Dirty Sexy Money. You were on Nip Tuck, Ryan Murphy's show, an amazing show, by the way, if you guys haven't seen it. That this must have been quite a feat to pull off. What did these auditions look like, and what were the initial roles that you would be called in for?
Well, I mean, I did Dirty Sexy for probably 3 years because we did maybe 2 years. We did half a season. The writer's strike happened. The financial collapse happened. Then we did another season, and then it ended. And then I went and did Nip Tuck. I was offered the role in Nip Tuck by Ryan, and then after Nip Tuck, it was like an uphill battle. Like I would get called to go in to audition. A lot of them were drag roles. I would, occasionally get a call for a trans role. I would go in, I would get it, and then I would say like, okay, I'd love to do this, but I have to tell you, like, a trans woman would not stand and pee, and there has to be a better reveal than that.
Mm-hmm.
That the trans character. So I mean, it was just kind of like those kind of things, and that got better and better. And then Laverne got Orange, and then Jamie got Sense8, and and then it just started tumbling down, and Alexandria and Transparent, and it was just like we were all there, ready to work, and yeah.
How did I Am Cait, the Caitlyn Jenner reality show, come to you?
I got a call from one of the producers saying, we're doing a show, and it's about someone, we can't tell you who it is, but if you sign this NDA, we can let you know, we can give you the scoop. It was not for a show, it was just for a one night, the first episode, like just a dinner. So I signed it, and it was for Caitlyn, and I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. Yeah, no, of course I'd love to do this. So we filmed the first episode. E picked it up. Then they decided well, we can't just have Caitlyn without, people in her life, trans people in her life. So they invited a few of us to be on this cast. And that's kind of how it went down.
And what was the experience like working with her and also filming a reality show?
It was actually a really fun experience. I realized pretty early on it was going to be pretty major, like it was going to be a big thing. And at that point, Caitlyn was still like, nobody had really seen her. Everyone was trying to like get a peek.
Was this
And
before the Diane Sawyer interview?
um, we filmed before the Diane's. Yeah, I think it was. I think it was. I think, because I think Time Magazine, or was it Time? No, Vanity Fair was coming out and
Yeah.
came out when we were filming. So it was just all this kinetic energy. And it was super fun. And Caitlyn was so fun to be around and really curious, and had been obviously living this undercover for many, many, many years. The other girls were all from all different walks of life. And it wasn't until it started air. I remember one time we went to film in New York City. And I was doing my show that I do at the Dream Hotel every Gay Pride, except for last year, everything. And everyone was just gagging. I asked if Caitlyn could come. We filmed. It was super fun. One night we went out to go see American in Paris, and we snuck in. Someone found out that we were in there watching it. And my parents were there with us at the time, and the whole cast. We watched it. We walked into Times Square, and I've never seen anything like it in my life. The entire Times Square was turned towards the entrance of this theater. All the bleachers going up, everybody. Caitlyn walked out, and it was just like, I've never seen anything like it. It was craziness. But it wasn't until it started airing and I started getting messages from people around the world, I realized how impactful this is. I mean, she put the word trans on the lips of the world. I was vacationing in Portugal in the middle of nowhere, and these little ladies at the pot doing pottery were like, you are on the show, the Caitlyn show. I mean, you are Candis, right? I was just like, oh my God, this is crazy. I think the first season really helped, the awareness. The second season, unfortunately, turned really political because we were in the middle of like the craziest election of our lifetime. So, that's how that kind of went down. It was disappointing.
Are you in touch with her?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, I don't, but we talk every once in a while and check in on each other, and we just don't talk politics
There you go.
anymore.
And when you see someone like Ellen Page's journey to becoming Elliot Page on the cover of Time, like, how did you feel when you read that headline?
I mean, I think that everyone who finds the courage to come out and live their truth should be applauded. And so I am proud of anyone that can do that. So when I saw that, I was so proud of him that he was able to, like, finally, especially in the glare of the media. It's super hard, but super proud.
You've said that for trans people, from very early on, they have to delve deep into their own psyche and soul to discover who they are as a human being. And so for that reason, a lot of trans people tend to be very well developed, thought out people because they've had years figuring out who they are.
Yeah, I mean, and also they're very empathic also. I mean, I think that trans people have learned from very early on to always know what's going on in their surroundings. I mean, it comes from the fight or flight, kind of, situation. But I think that when you at 7 or 8 are wondering about gender and the role that plays in life and how you're going to move forward, how other people are going to react, treat you, how you're going to hold stuff back instead of be free. These are all really advanced thought processes, and for young people who are trans. So I think it really forces you to develop early. It makes you really think about who you are as a human being, your soul, where you're going, what you are, why you're here, why you're like this at a very young age, instead of, uh, playing with, you know, with your friends and thinking, you know, I can't wait to go to school tomorrow. And so I think that a lot of times we're advanced human beings that way, you know?
Yeah. I guess one final question is, what is the number one question you get from people who aren't quite sure where they're at with their either their sexuality or their gender? Like, what do you hear a lot, and what do you tell those people?
Um, I feel alone a lot. And my one thing to say to them is, I know you feel alone right now, and you might not have support or family that's there for you, but hold out. It gets better. And the most important thing is to find your tribe and to know that you are perfect the way you are. You're a unicorn and you are amazing. And so you will find your tribe. Hold on, hold out. It's coming. It gets better.
I love it. Thank you so much, Candice. This is
So,
fantastic.
oh my God, of course.
Thank you.
Thank
Where can everyone follow you online, just to keep up with everything you're doing?
Candis Cayne, CandisCayne, at Insta, Face, Twitter.
Face.